Hustleshare podcast is sponsored by Lark, the leading super app for work in Southeast Asia. Frustrated with juggling and paying for multiple tools for work? Hate mixing personal and business messages? Improve your team's productivity by 10 times with Lark, which combines business chat, email, video conferencing, calendar, project management, real-time translation, and much more into one super app. Trusted by companies like Xiaomi, Glints, Kumu, and Mamalu's. Get it for free at larksuite.com today. And also by Uno Digital Bank, a full-spectrum digital bank, licensed and regulated by the BSP. Manage your money and maximize its potential growth with a secure and trusted bank that fits right in your pocket. Open a savings or time deposit account, pay bills, shop with the Uno Virtual Debit MasterCard, or apply for a loan in the Uno mobile app today. This podcast is brought to you by Salmon, your trusted source for all your financial needs. Whether you're looking for easy financing with low down payments and fast approval, or seeking high returns with their 8.88% interest on time deposits, Salmon has you covered. Visit salmon.ph today and discover how they can help you achieve your financial goals. Rural Bank of Santa Rosa Laguna Incorporated is regulated by the BSP. For any concerns, email consumeraffairs@bsp.gov.ph. Deposits are insured by PDIC up to 500,000 pesos per depositor.
If the local regulators and, the central bank and everybody, if they're not ready to push you, it becomes very difficult, right? Yeah. It really becomes, you're really swimming against the tide.
Right.
And that's, as I say, just when you start these things, you're so naive, right? You're kind of bright-eyed. You want to take on everything. And then the reality soon sets in and you start to learn, okay, we need to make sure that you're building a product that, number one, is, you're kind of going with the tide with it. And from a reg perspective, it's feasible.
Welcome to Hustleshare, the podcast that features the daily grinds of unique hustlers around the world to show not our differences, but that our hustles are very much alike. Now here's your host, Ronster Baetiong.
Welcome to the latest episode of Hustleshare Podcast. Super duper excited today because we're going to be talking about empowering freelancers, okay? And then getting them to technically maximize their earnings, because this startup that we will be featuring along with their amazing founder is going to be zeroing in on this arbitrage that we're talking about. This majority of the time when Filipinos or Filipino freelancers always talk about hey, let's earn in dollars, and then so many people take advantage of the unavailability of getting USD to transfer to PHP. What people don't realize is that they lose so much money in that process, and people get a bit of a big chunk when that happens. But without further ado, let's welcome to the show the co-founder and CEO of Elevate Pay, Mr. Khalid Keenan. Whoop, whoop. Khalid, welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks, Ronster. Thanks for having me.
All right. Again, super duper excited. I love what you guys do. And again, the fact that you guys are a YC company speaks volumes. But before I get carried away, I need to ask you the $1 million question. Khalid, what's your hustle?
So Elevate Pay, we offer US dollar accounts that are US based to freelancers around the world, as well as remote workers, specifically in emerging markets. The difference between our accounts and what you typically see out there, through the PayPals, is we offer a real US dollar bank account. Because when you open an account with Elevate, you're actually opening an account with Bangor Savings Bank. So we like to think ourselves basically as kind of the next evolution in terms of you've had the wallets and kind of really the hacky ways that people have earned in dollars and been able to bring it back. We're now giving you full-fledged US dollar accounts.
Right.
Add to that a remittance platform so that whenever you need those dollars, you send them back.
Yep.
And probably the most important piece, we make sure that you get market FX rates. No 3% charges, no 4% charges.
Sneaky charges.
Correct.
All right. So I love that because again, what people don't understand is that, yeah, okay, 3%, 4%. But if you add that up on how much you're losing, especially if you're really in 12 months, how much you can possibly make, you lose so much just because of that.
No, it's absolutely outrageous. And I mean, you've got to look at it. If you look at the type of people who now do this, you're looking at software professionals, marketing professionals, customer service associates. Mm-hmm. If people in the UK, where I'm originally from, or the US, when they got paid, had 3 to 4% of their paycheck just taken, just by the bank, gone, it would cause outrage, right? So, in our heads is like, we don't see why this is an acceptable situation right now for people who are doing the same work, right? Yep. That's the problem we're trying to fix.
It's literally highway robbery.
It's outrageous, yeah.
But again, here to solve that, and you guys have been solving it. But before we get carried away again and talk about how you're solving it, I need to go all the way back with you. But before that, I need you to buckle up because we're going to have to ride the Hustleshare time machine. And we are back to where it all started because at the end of the day, before every hustler has chosen to technically solve problems, they came from a really good origin story. And that's what I want to understand. So, Khalid, obviously, I want to understand now what was it like growing up and what was the first recollection of you of you being exposed to hustling that you remember? Because every immigrant has its own chip on their shoulder story. What was yours?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So actually, probably the first real, I'd say, hustle business we started was probably when I was a teenager. I'm a software engineer, right? That was my original passion. It still is.
Okay.
And me and a couple of friends actually set up. There's a type of shoe called Vibrams. I don't know if you know them, but they're the 5-finger shoes. It basically looks like you're wearing, bare feet. Yeah.
Yep.
So they weren't really popular in the UK where I was growing up. And at the time, we kind of saw the opportunity to build that. But back then, you didn't have the Shopifys. You only had eBay,
right?
Or paid a lot of money to build it. So, what we initially kicked off on was just trying to get the website built, the business built. And then we just started peddling these shoes.
Wow.
Basically for about 3-4 years. I think that was the first major one. A lot of mistakes we made. It's quite funny actually looking back when I speak to my friends about it now. But yeah, I'd say that was the first serious hustle we did.
No, but how did you source out because I bet you guys were kids. How did you source the supply and how were you able to distribute it properly, especially if you did it for 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, basically, we just saw someone wearing these trainers randomly when we were away traveling, and we were like, kind of blown away because
they catch the eye.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like bare feet, and the whole idea it's around barefoot running and so on. Once we found that, it was really just a case of research, right? This is the beauty of the internet. Once you get on and research it, a lot of people don't actually know who you're dealing with. They don't know it's a bunch of kids on the other side. So once we could build the website, build the look and feel, then we kind of went and say, look, we want to distribute these.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. Now, after that, what was it like growing up in terms of what did you take up? And you mentioned you're a dev by heart. So when did you start twiggling with them keyboards to start writing code?
I started probably. So I'm 36 now, but I started coding probably around 11. We had a buddy actually down the road. He's quite an interesting character. One of these quirky type of characters.
Yep.
And he just randomly had this book, for programmers who'll know on Visual Basic. And he just got us into it. Yeah. This was right, and and then we started playing about, and of course at that point, kind of the curiosity just kicks in. Once you can start building, and it just spiraled from there. You start writing small programs, then you play about with building games, then you start doing some online platforms, then you build a shop, a shopping cart, and
Right. What I give credit for very early programmers or devs is that the amount of self-learning you're going to have to do, and even the way you guys learn was way, way different. You can't just go to Google University or YouTube University or even ChatGPT now to actually just source out and see what those are like. Back then, it was very, very, very difficult to get that done. What do you remember doing that was really profound that still applies to this day? Because this is one key skill of an entrepreneur. You're going to be having a hard time as an entrepreneur if you don't have the ability to learn new things on your own without a playbook. And if you figure this out very early, man, that's a life skill that you just unlocked.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think software engineering, I think it's the same as any other skill.
Yeah.
Whether it's, I don't know, if you're a footballer, if you're playing golf, if you're playing tennis, if you're getting into some other skill, you can read about it all you want. You can read about the theory of it and watch the videos all you want. You just, deliberate practice is the one, right? You just have to, if you want to become a good developer, you have to write code.
Yeah.
I can read books all day and understand about the theory of it, but you just have to write program after program after program, release it, see how people react. It breaks. Or what did I do wrong here? Why could I not scale this particular product? I think deliberate practice and consistency in doing stuff is probably the most overlooked, kind of, I wouldn't even call it a skill, but like requirement you need to get good at anything. I know there's this 10,000 hour rule, right?
Yes.
And I don't know if 10,000 hours is right or wrong, but
Justin Bieber thinks it is. So there.
It makes sense. Like,
just kidding.
You just have to practice. And if it's something you enjoy,
correct,
it kind of, it will make the most of it.
No, totally agree. Now, I want to understand. So you obviously doubled down on this. You took a Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Science in Imperial College London. So how did then, you're already doing this pre-college or undergrad. So by the time you got to college, how did that enhance that passion now, or the fundamentals that you already had?
So that's interesting, actually. I think a lot of what we did when you're younger and just playing about is you're just building stuff for the sake of it, the fun of it. And as we quite mentioned, you talk about fundamentals. I suppose that's what the university did, really. That's when you start looking at the grounding. Okay, well, for example, Visual Basic, I'm using it a lot to build. But how do you actually, how do you actually go and create a programming language? If you're looking at the underlying, it's one thing using databases for your product. How would you go about actually building a database, or how would you build an operating system from scratch?
Got it.
I think they're really, really valuable because once you start to get an idea of the core of how something's built, basically that gives you the foundations to start building what I'd say is much more serious technology, as opposed to the small projects, the fun projects, starting to build, large scalable systems, and it doesn't get much more serious than finance, right? You're dealing with people's funds and money. So I think that's kind of taking it and professionalizing it, getting you ready for industry.
Right.
Is probably where university came in.
Sounds good. Now, obviously, again, it's a university sort of like application of it, but it's still not real life. When was the first line of code that, like, say, commercialized that you started writing? Because I look at it, you started very early as well. September 2016, you're audit junior, and then you did Java development as an intern in Goldman Sachs in 2010. But prior to this, did you also write code for, say, build your own products at the same time? Correct.
So, for example, I was telling you about the Vibrams. I started we built the sites ourselves. I used to build a lot of shopping carts and so on for people. This is kind of before Shopify, right?
Okay.
So those were what you'd call commercial in the sense, but they were not huge systems.
Got it.
When I actually got into, I don't know what you'd call it, the real world, but you mentioned Goldman. I stayed there for about 3 years. Once I moved into a bank, then I started to see, this is what a huge system looks like with hundreds of thousands of lines of codes, different systems depending on it, and with serious consequences if stuff goes wrong, right?
Yes.
Because
yes.
The mindset beforehand was always about, look, just go build it, break, doesn't matter. Once you move into a bank, it's much more, okay, now you need to start building stuff where it doesn't break. And when you start looking at making changes, how do you make sure that what you do doesn't break? Or if it does break, you can quickly revert stuff. It's a completely different kind of mindset, much more of an engineering mindset, I'd say.
Absolutely. But did you unlearn a lot of the things also that you developed very early on? Because again, banks are very high stakes. You're going to have to come into a situation where things are already pretty much set. I mean, there's a lot of room for creativity, but things I imagine would be a bit rigid over what you can and you cannot do.
Exactly. It's kind of pros and cons, right? You come into a system, you come into an industry like that, you learn what it's like to build mission critical systems, right?
Yeah.
How do you ensure that things don't go wrong? Probably not as enjoyable or not as kind of, you mentioned the word creative, as perhaps if straight from uni you join a high flying tech startup, Facebook, for example, is the prime example, because you're building cutting edge stuff, breaking as you go along, and learning there. But they're different skill sets, right? I think if you want to be a good all round engineer, I think it's good to get, if I was to give some advice to someone starting, just out of uni, I wouldn't stay somewhere for 5, 6, 10 years, right? I'd do 2 years here. If you can move into this industry, that industry, something more, like start to build a kind of a rounded skill set. Because it is a different mindset you need, right? The only consistency I'd say a lot of it around, you say, is kind of problem solving, right? Regardless of where you're going at the end of the day, regardless of what programming language you use or what role you're in, problems just come up constantly. Regardless of the work you're in, right? Maybe in startups, it's exponentially worse. You literally have problems day to day.
Right.
So problem solving, I think, is a big one as well.
And one thing about being a software engineer, and I always liken this to team sports, right? You cannot thrive as a software engineer, especially in an environment like this, if you're not a good teammate. Because if you deviate from whatever the plan is, one wrong line of code can crumble the whole damn thing. So what did you learn about being the team dynamics in Goldman Sachs while you were a software engineer there?
No, it's a great question. Just one kind of anecdote around that. There are certain roles where sometimes the more people you hire, you can hire someone in. And if they don't do well, okay, you just don't do as well. But there are certain roles you hire for. If you get it wrong and they do a bad job, they can actually crumble the system, right? And you can literally go backwards quite fast. And, in terms of team dynamics, probably one of the things Goldman was great at is great mentors. That's one of the things you really, really need, especially if you come in, you've been coding since you're a teenager, you kind of think you know everything. And you literally know nothing, right?
Yep. Humble pie is the first piece of humble pie right there.
Exactly. It very quickly gets real, right?
Right.
So having a great mentor, I think is good. Basically, this is the other thing with development. Things are going to go wrong. Yep. At some point, you're going to commit some code that breaks stuff. And if you don't, it means you're not making enough changes.
Correct.
So having a good team in there that understands, look, when something goes wrong, they're kind of there to back you up. It's a lot more important having that kind of positive team who are in, look, figure out let's solve what went wrong first.
Yep.
Then let's come round and figure out why did it go wrong, as opposed to shouting and screaming at you, right? Which I've seen in certain companies.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where, right, nobody wants to make any changes anymore.
Correct.
Because people are scared. And that's a lesson that I think stuck with me now, right? Even now, when you look at a lot of not just the engineers, but a lot of the team we've got, you don't want people to be scared of trying new things.
No.
But, if things go wrong, okay, fix it first, fix it in a calm manner, then learn from it.
Yeah.
But you can't kill people about it. That's really the wrong way. Really start to build a horrific work culture if that's the case.
Correct. And especially in innovation, you need to be pushing the envelope of what's possible and not possible. You cannot play the game with scared money. Just don't be that dude that pushes in production on a Friday afternoon. That's
yeah. It's funny to say that. We've got a rule. It's like if you're not around tomorrow, don't push code.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy. Okay, because that's how you become the punching bag of the whole company.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden everybody's going to be cleaning up after your mess. If you push code, and you're not going to be around to fix it. All right. Now let's take our first break, and when we come back, we will now talk about how you then jump to become a senior software engineer, and obviously what led to you creating Elevate and getting into YC. Well, let's talk about that more after the break.
Hey hustlers, money issues and financial stress are a reality we all face, and ignoring them won't make them disappear. That's why our sponsor, Salmon, is committed to making managing your finances easy and more accessible. With Salmon financing, you can shop to over 2,000 Salmon partner stores nationwide and bring home your dream purchases today with a low down payment starting at just 10%. Plus, it's super easy to apply. Just one valid ID is needed and you can get approved right then and there. No need to wait for payday. Just take what you need now and pay for it over time. And if you're someone that's looking for ways to grow your money, Salmon's time deposit accounts at the Rural Bank of Santa Rosa, Laguna, which is regulated by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, offers a fantastic 8.88% interest rate for a 12-month term for deposits of more than 500,000 pesos. That's currently the highest rate in the Philippines. Deposits are also insured by the PDIC with up to 500,000 pesos per depositor, so you know your money is safe and secure. It's definitely a great way to make your money work harder for you effortlessly. Since launching in 2022, Salmon has raised over $60 million and is backed by industry giants like the IFC, ADQ, and Northstar Group, ensuring they're a reliable partner in your financial journey. So whether you need financing, credit, or high-return savings option, Salmon has you covered. So visit salmon.ph today to see how they can help you achieve your financial goals with ease. Again, that's salmon.ph. Finance made easy with Salmon.
And we're back from the break. We are still with Khalid Keenan that told us fundamentals of coding and how to be a good teammate in a dev environment. Because again, there's a lot of prototypes or archetypes of devs, right? You know, there's this lone wolf who doesn't really want to be whatever, but it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, you're going to be pushing into one environment and in production, and all that shit needs to work together well. It's a team sport. Right. So you need to be able to play your role well. And this is what I want to zero in, because after Goldman Sachs, you became a senior software engineer. I'm pretty sure now at the leadership role, and you stayed here for 6 years in active VM. So what I want to know are a couple of things, like what was it like now being in a leader role as being one of the proteges, you know, needing a mentor to becoming the mentor? What was that evolution like while you were in active VM?
Gradual, to be honest. It's interesting because people sometimes separate. They're like, okay, junior software engineer, senior software engineer, and you know, it's not a binary step, right?
Correct.
Goldman actually have a great way they do this. They're like, the way before you get promoted into a role, you're basically doing that role anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Before you become a vice president, you're basically acting as a vice president. Before they tell you you're a senior engineer, you're basically becoming a senior software engineer.
You've earned it.
You kind of earned it. And like, how do you know that? Well, it's because you've probably started to specialize in a specific area. Mm-hmm. People are starting to ask you certain questions about areas, areas in the code or specific context, specific use cases. Mm-hmm. You start to be a bit more generous with your time, or your time's maybe not spent coding all the time, right? You're now starting to review code where you actually need to start thinking, well, I can't just do this all the time on my own. There's other people who need to help me build this software, and I need to make sure they're positioned in the right direction. Mm. You need to, a lot of the times, I think it's really important sometimes. I hate this, a real pet peeve of mine is when you see people in senior roles throw people under the bus, even if it was their fault, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, Active VMs are great. Basically, that was much more of a consultancy base where we'd go out to banks and start to consult for them. So you'd always have team working with you of people who are a bit more junior.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, whatever code gets pushed out, if it breaks, it's your fault, right?
Yep.
Because look through the permutations. Well, either you didn't give the right specs, or they managed to push the code without you checking, which means you didn't set up the right processes and the right checks and balance.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you should be responsible. And that ends up building a much better culture all around, because you tend to see that the junior developers will tend to trust you more. Right. They'll tend to learn more off you, and they'll tend to learn a lot more about the mistake. Mm-hmm. And that's really all that, you talk about what the important thing about becoming a senior engineer. It's the more mistakes you make, the quicker you learn.
Correct.
Right. So once you become a senior, you need to know, okay, what was it like to be a junior? Mm-hmm. And how can I build the best environment so that guys can make positives and learn and improve from them? That's really it. I think as long as you keep learning and improving and specializing, you're naturally just going to go up that way.
Yep. That's amazing. Now, in terms of skill set also. Let's talk about now Active VM. Of course, you level up not just leader, but also the skill set also. Because again, you've been failing, you've been coding, you've been churning out code technically. How did you evolve as a dev in Active VM, and what were the languages you started to? Because again, you have to also relearn and unlearn old code because you have to keep up with the times.
Yeah, I mean, look, the languages. We've done Java, TypeScript. We've done some stuff in C, Python. We've used a lot. I think it's funny you say you do. I remember you used the word fundamentals, and this is, I think, quite important. If you're going into engineering, a lot of the fundamentals are the same, right? Once you learn the fundamentals, you really should be able to pick up a new language relatively quickly.
Right.
The other thing that bothers me is you see, if you go on these forums and people are arguing, Java versus this, C versus that, TypeScript versus that, and they're slating it one way. It's like,
oh man,
why are you that concerned? It's like, just pick the right tool for the job.
It's non-binary anyway.
It's exactly right. There's so many tools out there, but in terms of what you're talking about as you get senior, I'd say it's important to really never think you've got so far that you need to stop coding and stop learning. Right? You need to continually be coding. These side projects, I think, are some of the best things you can do while you're working on your day-to-day, right? Because they're the things that are going to allow you to improve. Like most of the time, you're going to come in and say the code base is in Java.
Right.
As much as you want to learn and get creative, at the end of the day, there's a business to run and they need you to do. But how can you experiment with new techs that might come in and improve that? You can only really start to do that in your own spare time.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, by the way, I've played with this Python library that does analytics in a way better way than we're trying to in Java. Let's experiment with that. I've tried it here. So I think that's a pitfall people can go into. Like, as you start to get more senior, like, make sure you really, don't get into the trap of, okay, I'm no longer coding.
Right. Because all of a sudden you're going to be thrown into the fire and you are rusty. And all of a sudden, like, what? You're looking at your terminal. It's like, what? How do I start with this? Or whatever you're used to doing is already passé. It does not apply anymore.
Exactly. And like, reviewing code, how do you speak to the new guys that are coming through?
Yep.
Really important. It all just comes back to practice, right? Keeping your tools sharp.
Yeah. Okay. Now, after this, you became an engineer in Pinborn Technology. And obviously, the next thing was Elevate. Now, this is one thing I really want to find out. Every single entrepreneur, whether you're a dev, business guy, creative guy, always had the itch. So I want to find out when was the itch moment for you and what triggered you to finally scratch it and create Elevate?
Just a bit of backstory to actually Elevate. The way it started, we were looking at this dollar for emerging markets. And we'd been talking about it with the founders I knew for a while.
Right.
So the itch was not quite at that point, but we'd been talking. And we knew the problem was there, but we were originally looking to solve it actually in East Africa. That was the initial problem.
Wow.
And what we were looking to do was build local digital banks with dollar products, because we in our head, we were like, the biggest problem is inflation.
Right.
So that's when we really started to think about the problem.
Like,
the itch
when you say East Africa, are we talking Somalia, Ethiopia?
Ethiopia, Uganda,
Mozambique?
Sudan.
Okay. Wow. Okay. All right.
And because again, countries with large inflation issues where typically people protect themselves by holding dollars.
Correct. Because their local currencies are messed up because of so much stuff going on.
Turmoil and so on. But as with most places, they've got people who are earning, who need to live, right? So that was initially when we got into, you were mentioning Y Combinator, that was the initial start. We were going to build digital banking in East Africa. But it's as we slowly, and the itch really came as a bunch of founders came together and we had different skill sets on the business side, on the tech side and so on. And as usual, the more and more you talk about it, the more and more you're itching to do it. And then eventually we just pulled the trigger and said, look, let's apply to YC. We think this is a good idea. Let's look at it. Lo and behold, we got in and then we made the moved to East Africa to kick that off.
You literally moved to East Africa. Where at?
We did, yeah.
In Khartoum?
So we stopped Khartoum in Sudan, correct.
Wow.
So we initially looked to start building the dollar banking product there from a local perspective. which was it was a great year, met some fantastic people. Slowly then, that's when we started, and you see this all the time with startups, right? The pivot, we started to actually see, okay, you know, the problem really isn't here's local dollar banking, it's people looking to earn, but get paid into US-based dollar accounts.
Right.
But that's how the itch started, really. Conversations, right? Conversations with friends.
So, okay, you mentioned obviously the pivot, but before we talk about that, I'll just go on a side mission and a tangent real quick. As you mentioned, you had co-founders. And again, this is the being in a dev environment is prep work for co-foundership, because in a startup, it's a team sport. So talk about your other co-founders, because you mentioned that they complemented each other. You guys complemented each other well. Who did you co-found this with, and how did you build the dynamic to have a really fruitful co-foundership?
Yeah, it's we'd actually the skill sets you'd looked at doing is, and as I'll actually caveat this with our business, is co-founders come and go, right? You actually start at the beginning. You know, people have different ideas, and relationships.
That's why you vest.
Sorry? Yeah,
that's exactly why you vest for shit like that when it happens.
And business ideas change, right? You learn new information, you move on. People have different commitments, families, so on. It's really difficult, right? There's a lot of factors in this. But to start with, really, the way we met is we just had great different skill sets. We all kind of had a business mindset. Some had backgrounds in venture capital, some had backgrounds in banking. Myself, I was deep into kind of engineering as well as finance within engineering. We had another guy who's completely from a product and data analytics background.
Okay.
So it's really, once we got together and started talking and everybody had a slightly different perspective, that's when you knew, okay, this is now a team that could potentially do something.
Correct. Because you have to come from very different vantage points. Because we all see the same shit in the same light. Oh man, that's when you should be scared. Like, why are we seeing the same thing and there's no healthy arguments and whatnot? And you're not solving it.
And then, complex problems tend to have a lot of different, there's a lot of things you need to do to solve them, right? If you look at the dollar banking, for example, the tech security, that in itself is one whole big issue. Then you've got compliance and reg, one whole big issue. Then you've got growth, marketing, and so on, whole big issue. So you need kind of different approaches to be able to bring all these teams together. And you are going to bump heads at times, which tends to happen.
That's normal.
Yeah. Having the different perspective is just absolutely critical, right?
Okay. Now, before we go back to the sacred timeline, what was your YC experience like?
Oh, YC was unbelievable. Yeah, really, really good. More for the network.
Of course.
Bookface is incredible. The knowledge they give you is great. Look, I mean, these guys, they see thousands and thousands of startups, right?
Yeah.
Probably any founder will know, like, everybody's got an opinion, right? Everybody has an opinion about your business. You should do this, you should do that.
Right.
With these guys is they've literally seen thousands and thousands of companies. So whatever they're telling you, whether you agree or not, at least it's coming from, it's coming from a logical perspective.
Absolutely.
So that, I think, is a lot. They will be very ruthless and truthful in telling you where they think your product is, where they think you should go to, and what you should be doing on a day to day. So I think they're absolutely fantastic. They're also quite, the fundamentals they teach you are quite basic. It's like, look, what problem are you solving? Is it really a problem? And then go and speak to your users.
Got it.
And literally nearly every time you come up with one issue, that will be the answer. Have you spoken to your users? No? Okay, go and speak to them, figure it out.
Right.
It was a great experience.
Sounds good. Now, all right, let's go back to you guys being in Khartoum. So you mentioned you literally went to East Africa.
Yeah.
I've never met a startup start off in Sudan. Sudan, the OG Sudan, not South Sudan, the OG Sudan. Because if you don't know, and if you're living under the rock, Sudan and South Sudan split up in 2011, or 2013. That's why the youngest country in the world is South Sudan, because they're technically, ethnically, and religiously different, right? Sudan is technically Muslim or Arabic. And then South Sudan is more the Dinka tribe, the tallest people in the world is just found in South Sudan. So how difficult was it to launch in Khartoum, and how did you get their initial traction there?
Yeah, absolutely. So living there was actually because we'd also, one of the founders was originally from Sudan as well. Living there to start with wasn't as difficult as we'd expected. There was obviously some political situations that made it difficult.
Right.
But actually living there, it's like most places, once you actually go there, people are brilliant. They're great. They're just trying to kind of, improve the lives of their families, right? So, and the Sudanese, I don't know for anybody who perhaps isn't aware, the Sudanese are some of probably the nicest people you'll ever meet, right? Their hospitality is incredible.
Right.
So actually living there wasn't too difficult. I think really the difficulty came in actually executing there.
Yeah.
It wasn't really more just the country itself. I think it would have been the same in any of the countries. I think just the idea that we were trying to do in each country of getting locally regulated and doing local dollar accounts.
Yeah.
I think we were probably very, very naive in terms of what you needed to do to deliver that. So the difficulty really wasn't in the country. It was more in the product we were trying to build. But yeah, I had the brilliant time, to be honest, in Sudan.
So you mentioned that the product was a difficult part. What about it, and how did you overcome it?
So the local regs, right? Local regulations are always going to be difficult. Bureaucracy can be difficult.
Red tape.
If the local regulators and the central bank and everybody, if they're not ready to push you, it becomes very difficult, right? It really becomes, you're really swimming against the tide.
Right.
And that's, as I say, like, just when you start these things, you're so naive, right? You're kind of bright-eyed. You want to take on everything. And then the reality soon sets in and you start to learn, okay, we need to make sure that you're building a product that, number one, is, you're kind of going with the tide with it. And from a reg perspective, it's feasible, right?
Makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned there's a pivot. What was the next move? Because obviously, again, you technically still became a bank, and you literally this USD, this fiat. If crypto guys are listening to this literal fiat money is stored in a proper bank. What was the next move that you guys did to take it to that the current iteration of Elevate?
I think it's right. It's through speaking with users, right? That's where you start to learn a lot. Initially we were looking local dollar accounts, but then when you actually speak to more and more people, the freelancers, the remote workers, and obviously remote work over the past 5 to 10 years has gone like that, right?
Yep.
The likes of Deal, TopTal, Upwork.
Thank you, pandemic. Right there.
And then, of course, the pandemic that just took it into the stratosphere, right?
Yep.
If you actually speak to these guys, what's the biggest problems? They're like, nobody wants dollar accounts locally. So like, our problem is that we can't easily and quickly get paid from where we actually work. And the bulk of us are working for US companies or, European companies. So that's where we started to think, okay, what we need to really solve is how can we offer US-based accounts to remote workers around the world? And at that point, we said, okay, this is the pivot we need to do. And then we kicked from there. Then you need to figure it out.
Okay. So what was that move, and how did that, after talking to the users, how did you find the bank, and how did that lead to where it is now?
Look, that's where you've just got to sit down, trial and error, and you've got to spend weeks and months doing your research, seeing what current solutions out there, how they built it. And then you get on LinkedIn and you start blasting anyone and everyone, right?
Yep.
LinkedIn is a gold mine, right? An absolute gold mine. You start speaking to anyone around people who've done compliance, people who've done similar products, people who've done banking products, people who've done FX, and you just start to learn. From there, you figure out, right, these are the viable options and the ways we can do it. Who are the banks that can potentially support us? And then you go all out and try and secure them.
Okay. So I've had a chance to talk to digital banks who started out here in the Philippines. And in order for them to really get to where they needed to be, they needed to really raise a significant round, because the number one product that they have is money, right? If you don't have enough money, how the hell are you going to be able to get that done? How are you able to fundraise for this? And walk me through that fundraising process. Sure.
So we fundraised in the end of 21, start of 22.
During YC.
And it was really through the back of YC.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people won't want to say that, but yeah, when I said what's one of the great things about YC, this is it, demo day.
Yes.
Right? Because you're put in front of some of the best investors there are out there.
Correct.
So YC is absolutely brilliant for that. And as to your point about, do you need to raise capital to do a fintech business? I think you do. I do think you need to have quite a substantial amount of capital, which is not always what everybody wants to hear. But the reality is, if you're building something regulated, look, before you can even start to think about getting a banking partner, you have to build your whole compliance reg team and technology, have it ready before you've even got one customer, right? Before you've even got your banking partner.
Correct.
That takes cash. Like you can't do it on zero amount. And especially when we're not talking about a crypto solution here. We're not talking about an unregulated solution. It's fiat, right? It's there for the regs around it are strict for a reason. So yeah, and you do need capital, I think, for something like this.
How are you guys able to raise, and how much should you guys raise to get to give you that jump start?
Sure. So the initial round was about 4.5 million in total of actual cash, and the way we did it was once we'd gone through YC, we'd started to build the product and the partnership at that point. Started to get a few early users on board, but this is when we were obviously in East Africa. And based on that, we went out with the idea of dollar banking and so on, and really just got in front of as many investors as possible and raised that large round. It was helped by the fact that at that point, the market was hot. You can't ignore that. Sometimes luck has a lot to do with this. 2021
was a good year for all of us. We also raised in 2021. So I was like, and then it turned south. Oh my God. Hell froze over after that.
It turned sour bad, right? So we were lucky in that case. We literally caught the top of the market.
Right.
So sometimes you just have to hold your hands up, right? Accept the luck.
Okay, sounds good. Now let's take our last break, and when we come back, of course, we will now talk about how you're able to generate traction, how basically you guys are able to do what Elevate is doing now across the world with people that need their USD, and then again, take advantage of this product without being fleeced by other alternatives out there. Well, let's talk about that more after the break.
Hey hustlers, wish there was an easy way to open a bank account and grow your money without the hassle of lengthy application process and income documents? Well, I got good news because today's sponsor, Uno Digital Bank, is here to help you achieve your financial goals. You can easily open an account with the Uno app in just 5 minutes and one valid ID. And as one of the 6 digital banks licensed by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the company is committed to providing customers with simpler, better, and more accessible banking. Last year, Uno Bank was recognized by the Asia Banking and Finance Awards and bagged the title Open Banking Initiative of the Year due to the success of its partnership with GCash, one of the Philippines' leading mobile wallet platforms. And with the Uno mobile app, you can access an hashtag Uno Ready savings account and enjoy daily interest crediting. With their hashtag Uno Earn or hashtag Uno Boost time deposit accounts, you can enjoy a high interest rate of up to 6.5% per annum. Enjoy monthly payouts with hashtag Uno Earn and flexible tenors with hashtag Uno Boost. Other app features include pay bills, the Uno Virtual Debit MasterCard, life insurance, scan and pay with QRPH, and loans. And the one thing that I really love about Uno Digital Bank is they're open to collaborate with a lot of Filipino startups. I've had a chance to see the partnerships that they've had lined up with the startups that they have, and it's truly exciting to see how a digital bank like Uno can enable startups to unlock the power of fintech through digital banking. So if you're ready to elevate your banking experience, download the Uno mobile app today from the Google Play Store or App Store. Or if you want to collaborate with them, I'll be happy to give you an intro. Just shoot us an email at hello@hustleshare.com. Hey hustlers, how many apps are you using at work these days? 5, 10, 20? Let's face it, there are chat apps for internal communication and emails for external, Cloud Drive for docs and wikis, calendars and video conferencing, spreadsheets and project management software, And probably yet another tool to connect them all. It is a mess. And if you're collaborating with cross-border colleagues, partners, or suppliers, it gets even more complicated. And don't you find it disruptive when your personal and business messages get mixed up? And if this sounds painfully familiar, switch to Lark, the leading super app for work designed to increase your team's productivity by 10x at an unbelievable fraction of the cost. With Lark, manage projects, chat with your team, build a knowledge base with wikis, and automate workflows such as approvals without code effortlessly from one app. No switching or integration needed. Join fast-growing companies in over 125 countries, including Xiaomi, Glint, and the Philippines' very own Kumu and Mama Lou's, who trust Lark as their workplace super app. I've started using Lark myself for our pressure washing business service, Papa Pressure, and I'm totally loving it. Want to see how Lark can revolutionize your business? Click the link in the description or download Lark for free at larksuite.com. That's larksuite.com, the productivity super app every business needs.
And we're back from the break. We're still with Khalid Keenan and told us the amazing journey that they technically did to get this done. So now there's clarity. You were able to talk to users. But I want to zoom in on talking to users because there's a lot of people, there were a lot of startup founders kind of gloss over sometimes. They think they know and they skip this and they start building shit that nobody wants. And you know how YC tells it, go out and do things that don't scale. Talk to your users. That's what YC keeps preaching every day and day in and day out. How were you guys able to get that done? And how were you able to get the right feedback? Because again, people might get confused that people like their shit, but apparently they don't. How were you able to get that done?
Look, the great thing about the hypothesis we had, right, about remote workers is, you know, I said LinkedIn's a gold mine.
Yeah.
It's like, look, we believe that people in emerging markets, for example, pick a country like Egypt where we first launched, have issues in getting paid from the US. So all you need to do is find people living in Egypt, filter, work for a US company, and just connect. Speak to as many people as possible. You'll very quickly find out if this idea is, okay, this is really a pain point.
Yep.
Or no, I'm good. I've got this solution, that solution. But that's really the way we did it, right? We were quite lucky in that if you look at remote work and freelancing, so many people are on LinkedIn, right? And Upwork and so on. If you all you need to do is just sit there, spend a few hours, few days, few weeks, just kind of grinding away, speak with everyone. You'll quickly find out, okay, this problem actually exists, which is what happened.
Okay. That's amazing. That the proof is in the pudding now. That basically validates the assumption and the hypothesis. Now, Khalid, of course, before we talk about traction, we need to talk about the team. It can't just all be you and your co-founders. You need to surround yourself with the right people. But this time, as just like creating an engineering team, you get to cherry pick them. How did you surround yourself with the initial core employees? And what was the culture that you wanted to build when building Elevate?
Great question. The way we started it basically is we've always said from the beginning, we want to be as lean as possible.
Got it.
We want to try and have a very strong core team, and then figure out a way to scale with that. So the way we started is we actually figured, okay, fintech, what are the single most important roles here? It's going to be tech and compliance, by far the most important roles. So they're the two roles that you need an absolutely CTO who knows what they're doing, and more importantly, lead engineers who sit with them, who are just infatuated with the problem. And they're not just here to code and disappear, who just love the problem. And the only way you can do that is you can't just have a 1-hour interview or a random Codility thing for the engineers. You need to come up with problems for them to solve, come up with ways for them to speak with them over and over again to figure out, right, is this guy someone who can sit with us for 3 years and build this problem, right?
Correct.
That was really the first bit we wanted to do. Same with the compliance bit. Like, it's really hard to find these compliance guys in the US. They earn a huge amount of money, right? Working for banks and so on. So yeah, how do you attract people to come into a startup where the cash is a lot less, but the problem, you've got to kind of sell the problem. That's the type of people you need to find. Like, they're infatuated with the problem and they're willing to kind of take a risk.
Yeah.
In terms of the culture we try to build, like the main thing is we just want flat hierarchy, very transparent in the areas you can be transparent, right? So you look at, for example, like if you log onto our Slack, it's like you can see everything that's going on in the company.
Right.
It's obviously not controlled by compliance, for example. So everybody knows the growth numbers. There's no hiding from it, right?
Yep.
Everybody knows what marketing is going out. Everybody knows what engineering problems we've had. Everybody knows the bugs that have happened, the user feedback, what people are complaining about. We try to basically connect everyone through Slack. And then that way, everybody in the organization is kind of connected. They've got a feel for what's happening.
Right.
That's really what we try to build. Whether we can keep that as we grow,
we'll see.
It's difficult, right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
for now, it works really well.
Okay, great. Now, I want to understand how you were able to generate traction. Because again, once you're able to talk to the users, it validates the problem. You know crystal clear that what you need to do. How you're then able to launch quick and generate traction in order to double down on
it. Word of mouth is critical, right? If you're solving a problem, the good thing is in a lot of the countries we're in, right? If I'm a remote software engineer, I live in Egypt and I'm a software engineer for a US company. I probably know 20 other software engineers who work for a US company through uni, through guys we work together. So word of mouth in something like this, it can just spread like wildfire. That was probably more important. And then kind of getting your face out in terms of, there's a lot of great, obviously there's podcasts, there's a lot of YouTubers out there who specifically talk about freelancing. They're there to educate people on freelancing, how to improve your income. These are the guys you want to get in front of. Those kind of are the easiest ways I found. A lot of the other stuff, around writing, great content and blogs and stuff, that's great, but it's not going to get you users quickly.
Right. That's a long game.
That's a long game. Yeah, yes.
Right.
Word of mouth, I think, when the problem is severe, like it will spread like wildfire.
Absolutely. This is a solution that obviously just bridges that gap specifically. Now, I want to understand, Khalid. I'm going to go deep and personal as well. So as a founder, we evolve with our startups. Yeah. What was that evolution like? And you kind of have to evolve very, very quickly as your company evolves as well. What were those things that after we all have merit and meritocracy obviously exists, but that kind of goes out the window when you become a founder, right? Yeah. How did you evolve through the years over the past while you're doing Elevate?
Yeah, there's so many things you just start growing on. Like you mentioned once thing. You quickly need to understand that you're probably wrong on most things, yes. Especially when it comes to thinking what users want. Most of the decisions you'll make are probably wrong. No two ways about it, right? You're constantly going. You just need to make enough, adjustments. So I think basically the ability to get comfortable with making mistakes and adjusting.
Yep.
I think you need to quickly throw your pride out the window, right? You talked about humble pie earlier. You need to eat a lot of it. You need to get over a lot of your insecurities.
Yes.
I think as a founder. So, for example, I'm from an engineering background. We have a CTO. I might assume that, if the idea I had around the architecture didn't come from me, then, I feel bad and that's an issue. And I might resent someone on my team for coming up with a better idea.
Right.
It can happen, right? We're all human, right? You need to get rid of all those insecurities.
Yeah.
And everybody has them, right? Maybe you don't want to mention what they are, but everybody has so many of them. You need to try and get those under control. And I think now, as we're starting to grow, one of the cool things about being a founder, the stressful bit is you get to do everything, right?
Yep.
You're doing the ops, you're figuring ways to figure out, for us, like reconciliation, the FX piece of that, the compliance, starting to let go of all that. And realize that there's people who are way better than you at it. It's something that I've not learned quick enough, and I need to learn a lot quicker, even now. Basically butting in when people who probably don't want to tell you, hey, can you just leave me alone to get on with the work? But they don't want to tell you. I think that's a lesson I've learned.
Yeah.
And then the final thing probably is just that, we talked about kind of consistency and resiliency. Like there's no magic moments. There's no magic formula. There's just problems every single day, every single week.
Yep. You
just need to get into the habit of just working through them. Problem comes up, hit it. Problem comes up, hit it. And then soon enough, it just becomes part of kind of the DNA of your organization. Oh, a disaster's happened. Fine, let's fix it. That's probably the things I've learned. No magic moments. Don't get too high when good things happen. Don't feel too low when bad things happen. Try to stay.
Yep. Even keeled.
Even keeled. Yeah.
Again,
easier said than done, right?
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Khalid. I hope you had fun sharing your hustle here in Hustleshare. But before I let you go, of course, we need to address the elephant in the room. If they are sold and they want to try Elevate, where do they go and how do they do that?
Absolutely. Look, elevatepay.co or just get onto the App Store, hit Elevate Pay, download the app. You can get signed up very quickly. It's the typical process just to, personal details, KYC information, obviously, because it's regulated.
Yep.
You'll get online, you'll be onboarded within 24 hours and then start receiving your payments.
Right. And you now have a USD account and you can, up to you when you want to cash out on it without having to get fleeced by these outrageous and crazy fees that you always think is normal. But now we have Elevate Pay. Again, thank you so much, Khalid. But before I let you go, follow us on whatever podcast app you listen to, or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you did say some jargon, it's going to be the show notes on hustleshare.com. And if also you want to support Hustleshare, just like all the brands that support Hustleshare like this, you can check it out at premium.hustleshare.com. Again, Khalid, thank you very much.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Take care.
All right. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.